I will now take the sediment for this meeting of the Planning Committee held on the 27th of August 2024. Councillors Alec Allison and Ralph Barker are present. I have apologies from Councillor Arch Buchanan. The following members are present: Councillors Ross Clark, Jerry Convery, Margaret Cowie, Maureen Devlin, Colin Dewar, Mary Donnelly. I have apologies from Councillor Joe Fagan. The following members are present: Councillors Elise Frame, Alistair Fulton, Shalene Handybod. Councillor Graham Horn is not present. Councillor Ross Lambie is present. Councillor Martin Lennon is not present. Councillor Monique McAdams is not present. And the following members are all present: Councillors Leslie MacDonald, David McLachlan, Richard Nelson, Norman Ray, John Ross, Graham Scott, David Shearer, Helen Toner and David Watson. Thank you, and I'll pass you back to the Chair for today's business.
Thank you, Stuart. Just before we get into declarations of interest, I'm going to invite Fraser to refer to the site visit just before we ask for any declarations of interest. Fraser.
Okay. Thanks, Chair. With regard to item 10 on today's agenda, members will be aware that an informal site visit took place on the 22nd of August, which was attended by some of the members of the Planning Committee. I've discussed this matter with the Head of Legal and Administrative Services and can confirm that as the visit was not part of the formal decision-making process, that members who did not take part in the visit can still participate in the deliberation for planning application P231543. If, as would be the case with any planning application, they are satisfied that they have sufficient information of the proposals that allow them to vote on the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fraser, just for clarifying. I will then move into agenda item number 1 then for any declarations of interest. Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to declare an interest reluctantly against item 11. There was an assertion has been made that as the Chair of the Mackin Trust, I was aware of an email which was forwarded to all members of the Planning Committee. This is indeed not the case. I was not made aware of it. I am merely the Chair. I am not the CEO. However, rather than cause any dubiety, I will remove myself from item 11. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor MacDonald. I'll ask you just to leave just before we discuss item 11, and then we'll bring you back in for the rest of today's business. Any further declarations of interest? If there are no further declaration of interest, we'll move then to, please, item number 2. As the minutes of the previous meeting, these are submitted for approval as a correct record. These are on pages 5 to 10 in your pack. I will move these a correct and true and accurate record.
I'll second it.
Anyone otherwise minded? No? Agreed, thank you. We'll then move to agenda item number 3 then, is the review of the planning section of the scheme of delegation relating to planning applications. These are on pages 11 to 44 in your pack, and I will ask Fraser to present.
Thanks, Chair. This report seeks the approval of the Planning Committee to review and update the South Lanarkshire's existing planning scheme of delegation insofar as it relates to the decisions taken on planning applications. The Town and Country Planning Scotland Act requires planning authorities to prepare a scheme of delegation and to keep this under regular review. South Lanarkshire's scheme of delegation has not been updated for a number of years, and in this context it no longer corresponds with legislative change and statutory descriptions of development. A summary of the proposed changes is set out in Appendix 1 of the papers before you today, and while Appendix 2 and 3 have set this out in a tracked, changed and finalised text version so that members can see the amendments. As stated, the changes primarily address legislative changes and correspond with the relevant acts and regulations, but it is noted that all major and national applications, as well as those that are subject to an objection from a statutory consultee, which includes community councils, will be referred to the Planning Committee. Elected members can also ask that applications should be presented to the Planning Committee as per the existing arrangement, while a slight revision has been made that all applications from elected members, a member of the corporate management team or staff within the planning service or a close relative will need to be considered by committee. A final change is a slight increase in the number of objections that will be required before an application is presented to committee. The increase from 6 to 10 or more is considered appropriate, and Appendix 5 provides a comparison of the situation across Scotland's councils. If approved by the Planning Committee, the scheme of delegation will need to be presented to the full Council and thereafter submitted to Scottish Ministers for approval. But on the whole, it is hoped that members recognise the need to review the existing scheme of delegation and approve the proposed amendments and agree to the recommendations set out in Section 2 of the report presented today. Thank you.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments. Councillor David Shearer, please.
Thank you, Chair. Page 17, the changes to objectors, moving it from 5 to 10 in the urban area would not seem to be a problem. However, I would contend that in the rural area, especially in some of the smaller settlements, getting it anywhere near 10 might be difficult. So would it be possible to have an amendment there that it's 10 in the urban areas, but 5 we keep the 5 in the rural areas, just to make it fairer for anybody who lives in a village that's only got 9 houses?
Fraser?
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. You know, I'm not too sure how that would work in practice. I'm not too sure that is something that could actually be implemented consistently. As I mentioned, in terms of with Appendix 5, it does set out, and that's the 34 planning authorities are here and across urban and rural areas. I don't think we'd be inconsistent, not necessarily saying just because they do it somewhere else we need to do it in South Lanarkshire, but I think the other thing we would mention around this is it is quite easy to generate and to for a number, for 10 objections to be actually submitted. A local member can request that a planning application goes to committee as well, and a community council automatically means a referral to the planning committee. I think what we feel is if it's that there's quite a lot of fairly standard applications just by having the 5 that end up at planning committee, taking up the time of you as members, which could be approved quicker, could be dealt with quicker, and would be more, and it's more in keeping, I think, with what most authorities would have with that number. So I think the practicality of that could prove to be a problem, but I wouldn't like to think it's an issue that if a member was concerned about it, we would hold it back from going to the planning committee. So in reality, I wouldn't like to think it would have an impact on the decision-making process.
Thank you. Councillor, supplementary. Councillor Shearer.
Obviously, this is going through today and it will be reviewed before it goes to full council. Could we look at the practicalities of that just to make sure that there wouldn't be any difficulties? Just to try to resolve an issue before it becomes an issue. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, today we're looking for the approval of the planning committee. This needs to be signed off by full council. So it is a matter that we could bring forward in the paper at full council. It does then need to be ratified by the Scottish ministers beyond that as well. So there's a process to go through. But it's something we could look at, and I think we could refer to it through the paper that goes to full council on this one.
Councillor Ross Lambie, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just picking up from Councillor Shearer, similar concerns about the doubling effectively of the number of objections required and the impact that would have on, the roots of small people who live in small settlements, which they don't have that large number of residents. I think in the rural area, people don't make objections to planning applications willy-nilly. They don't go out of their way to object against a neighbouring landowner doing X, Y, or Z. So I think we're setting a very high bar now. I think we're asking a lot of people in the wider countryside to object, and I just don't think that's going to work. The other thing to bear in mind is that it'll obviously result in a larger number of applications being dealt with via delegated powers. And if you're refused by delegated powers, your only route of appeal is through the PLRB. You don't have the option of going to the Scottish Government Reporter. So I feel that it is a very significant decision, this, and it will potentially block an avenue for many applicants also. And my final concern on it really is we're in a bit of a period of change in the planning policy where we've had MPF4 come in, and there has been an uptick in recommendations by officers being overturned at the planning committee in recent months. And we know that there's potential further changes to MPF4 in the pipeline. So we seem to be in a period of flux in terms of the planning rules, the ones being imposed on us nationally and their compatibility with our ones locally. And it feels to me this isn't the right time to be changing the threshold for objections number of objections required to go to appeal. So we do have to decide this today as a committee. So I think I would like to propose an amendment that we refuse this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Lambie. Can I just clarify what you're proposing? To refuse the full scheme of delegation? Is that what you're proposing? That we take this proposal for the scheme of... Is that what you're proposing? Can you just clarify what you're actually meaning?
Yeah, pretty much. The papers before us get refused, go away, get revised, and come back to us at a later date.
Okay, I'll look for a second in a moment. I'll come to... If anybody else would like to speak, could you please indicate now? Councillor John Ross, please.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. I must admit to be in agreement with the two previous speakers. We continually hear from our colleagues in the rural areas that they do feel hard done to on a number of occasions. And this is another case where I feel that the planning could come up with a compromise. I don't necessarily think we should be dishing all of this, but I do think the particular item where we're looking at increasing 5 to 10 is something that I don't want to go along with. And I would certainly propose that we have an amendment that we keep this item, this proportion of the delegation scheme at 5 for rural areas and 10 for urban. That would be my position on this.
Thank you. So that will be 2 amendments. So you'll, I'll come look for a second and Councillor Ross in a moment. Councillor Alec Allison, please.
Thanks, Chair. Nothing new. The last 3 speakers have covered most of the points. The one thing I would be concerned about if it goes to 10 is a lot more work going to the PLRB, which therefore is not going to save time at all. Speaking to colleagues elsewhere, they would not be fully supportive of their councils being at 10 rather than 5. And it may be a case that other councils may be doing it, but just because they're doing it doesn't mean to say that we should, because it's not felt that it's a good fit for the rural area. I think, Fraser, you'd said it at the, God, I've forgotten what the committee was called, the procedures and standards, that you did not believe it was possible to differentiate between the rural and the urban area. So if that is the case, I think there's a lot of good stuff in here. Fraser, tidying things up, it's quite right. But this 5 to 10, for the reasons you've heard before, would not suit the rural area. So rather than kick the whole lot out, I wonder if they wouldn't be agreeable to simply the delegated powers element of this, staying where it is, an amendment on these lines, and letting and agreeing the rest, if that would not be a better way forward.
Thank you, Councillor Allison. I'll bring in Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Chair. I do think raising the number of objectors before bringing it to committee would be a general disservice. I think it will, in the end, create more work. It will certainly alert councillors to be more careful and not rely on the number of objectors. I do see that in the appendix that many other planning authorities remain at 6. I really would like to see it maybe referred for further consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Leslie MacDonald and then Councillor Ross Lambie.
Thank you, Chair. One of my questions, Fraser, why the increase now? And I understand what you've said. However, how many other councils have increased to 10? Do you have that figure to hand? No, but it said many, but I don't know how many. Oh, sorry, I missed that then. How many? Do you want an abacus, or is that? 43.
No, page 43.
Oh, page 43.
Yeah,
sorry. Sorry.
Sorry, Councillor, it's set out on page 43 of the report. As you can see, this is where it's a split across Scotland. And you've got Argyll and Bute that's more than 10. Angus at 5, Edinburgh at 20. Some have got no threshold at all. 6 or more is in 5, Glasgow, Highlands. So I'm afraid I don't have the...
No, you're fine. I can see it now.
There wouldn't necessarily be a consistent approach across Scotland. And I think what we've felt, and this is maybe from an officer perspective, it's the ease of actually generating what can be sometimes just 5 emails that then leads to an application going to committee, just means it's bringing matters to the committee that really shouldn't be coming to the committee. The other thing as well, which would stress with that, is that members at any time can ask for something to go to the committee. So it doesn't take away that, the ability for members to call that as well.
Thank you. Thank you. OK, I've got Councillor Lambie, Councillor Watson. I'm going to bring this to an end. So, Councillor Lambie.
Hi, thanks, Chair. Just speaking on the advice of some of my learned colleagues there, I think my motion or amendment to this motion would be that we just take out the increase in the number of objections required for referral to planning, but we keep the rest of the delegated powers proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Lambie. So that was already proposed by Councillor John Ross. Are you seconding that?
No, I think Councillor John Ross was proposing a split to have the 10 in the urban areas and 6 in the rural. Can
I just clarify, because that's not what I took out of Councillor Ross. So, Councillor, do you want to clarify what your actual proposal was? Because I've wrote down that it was removal of the number and to keep it at 5. Can I just clarify, Councillor John Ross, what you're actually...
Sorry, can you
use your microphone? Use your microphone, please.
Yeah, it was actually to keep it for 5 for rural and 10 for urban, if that could be achieved. If not, then I'm quite happy to go with keeping it the way it is at 5.
Okay, from my conversations with the head of planning, is that's not achievable to have 5 for rural and 10 for an urban area. So therefore, I don't think that would be competent, Fraser, to do that, because I don't think it would work. I don't think it will fit. But therefore, if you're willing to move that we keep that at 5 overall, then I'll take that.
I would move that then.
And, okay, more than 5, sorry, yeah. Okay, Councillor Watson, and then lastly, Councillor Scott. I'm not taking any more after Councillor Scott. If you come in, I'm sorry, I'm not taking any more. So, Councillor Watson.
I think some of that's just been answered by the last reply. I take Fraser's point, and I don't think it would be practical to split rural and urban. I think there'll be issues in urban areas that would have issues with higher numbers as well. And I accept the point, and I think the driver for this is to speed up the planning process. I think there's a national drive on that, and I think we should have a drive on that locally as well. And is it possible to keep it at 5 sorry, if you want to move it to 10, to if 5 or more than 5 objections, that is flagged up with a local member, to give that local member the opportunity to then ask it to come to planning. And that might be a bit bureaucratic, but at the end of the day, if not, I would move that we keep with the status quo. Thanks, Chair. And support the motion that's been proposed.
Thank you. Fraser, do you want to just clarify that point about notifying the member?
I would, no, let's say with that, Chair, in terms there's a weekly list that is sent out to members with all the applications that we have, all the objections are actually on the planning portal. It would create a bit of an administrative burden, I think, in terms of looking at something coming in at 5, contacting local members around that as well. It's, I think that, again, it could prove practically challenging. And I think it's in terms of my members, it's when they see it on the weekly list, that's when we tend to get the approach in terms of my members saying, I would like that to go to committee.
Thank you. Yep. Just press your button, David, please.
Yeah, except that weekly list comes out, but usually when that comes out, it's either saying it's delegated or not, whatever. I would take the point, no, if it's going to be bureaucratic, I would go with the motion. Cheers.
Thank you. I'll bring Councillor Scott, then we will bring this to a close. Councillor Graham Scott, please.
Thank you, Chair. No.
Yeah, we can hear you, Councillor Scott.
Okay. Thank you. There's a delay in the time here. There's a potential solution to this, and to go back to John Ross's point about trying to have 10 in the urban area and 5 in the rural area. There's 20 wards in South Lanarkshire. It could be specified on a ward basis. The urban wards specified could be 10 and the rural wards specified could be 5. And I remember years ago, I mean, the ones who have been around a long time, like your Deputy Jerry Convery, we used to have a rural affairs committee. It was specified on rural wards. So the split between rural and urban can be done. I mean, whether that's fully legal or not, then I'm up to Fraser for that. But yes, we could specify certain wards where it's 10 and certain wards where it's 5. I'm just throwing a potential solution into the mix here, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. We do have an amendment. I don't think that was an amendment from Councillor Scott. We've already been through that. Fraser said that can't work. So therefore, we have an amendment proposed by Councillor Lambie, seconded by Councillor Ross. I will move that the recommendation is that the proposed changes to the planning section of the Council Scheme of Delegation.
And I'll second it, Chair.
Okay, and the main reason for that is I think as local members we have the power to ask that something comes to committee. So if someone has and can't get to the 10, I'm sure they would approach you as your local member to get that to committee. So that would be my main reason for doing so, and I think it actually tidies the scheme of delegation up, and a lot of work has went into that. So I'll just ask Stuart, the clerk, just to clarify, and then we will take it to the vote.
Okay, so just to recap, so the motion as proposed by Councillor Nelson and seconded by Councillor Convery is that the report is approved as per the recommendations. And we have an amendment proposed by Councillor Lambie and seconded by Councillor Ross. The number of objections for applications would require to go to committee remain at more than 5. The vote is now open. If members can please indicate your voting preference. Thank you. Thank you. All members have now voted and I'm now stopping the vote. Okay, 16 members have voted in favour of the amendment and 5 in favour of the motion. I therefore declare the amendment carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. We will move on then to agenda item number 4, please. And that is application P220645. These are on pages 45 to 62. And this is the erection and operation of a wind farm, Cooter and Biggar, and I will ask Fraser. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. This report refers to a consultation that's been submitted to South Lanarkshire by the Scottish Government's Energy Consents Unit. The consultation relates to a proposal for up to 15 turbines and a battery energy storage system on a site 1.7 kilometres south of Lamington, immediately north of the existing Clyde and Clyde Extension wind farm. As stated, this application will be decided by the Scottish Government and not South Lanarkshire Council, and to that end, any representations from members of the public would need to be made to the Scottish Government. In summary, when assessed against existing local development plan and relevant national planning policies, it is considered that proposals are acceptable and that, subject to a number of conditions that are set out on pages 52 to 61 of the papers presented to members, that the Scottish Government's Energy Consent Unit is informed that South Lanarkshire Council has no objection to the granting of planning permission under Section 36 of the Electricity Act 1989. Thank you.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up then for any questions or comments, please. If there are no questions or comments, I am happy to approve the recommendations.
I'll second it.
All agreed? Thank you. Agenda item number 5 then is application P220881. These are on pages 63 to 74. And it's the erection of 6 turbines at Whiston and Biggar. Fraser?
Thanks, Chair. This application relates to a proposal for 6 wind turbines with a combined generating capacity of 30 megawatts, and it therefore falls to the Planning Authority to decide. The site is located approximately 2.5 kilometres south-east of Riggside and would require the creation of new accesses within the site and on the surrounding road network. The details of this have not been finalised, and as such, the road service had asked for the application to be deferred. Beyond this, though, it is noted that there remains an outstanding objection from the Ministry of Defence in relation to the potential impact on their low-flying training area and the seismological recording information system at Eskdale Muir. Nature Scott have also objected in relation to the significant adverse effect on the Upper Clyde Special Landscape Area. In addition to this, 15 letters of objection were received, and an objection from Dunedin Community Council has also been received expressing concern about the visual and cumulative impact. In assessing the proposals, it was agreed by the Planning Service that the impact of this proposal on the landscape would not be acceptable, and as such the proposal did not comply with Policy 11 of the National Planning Framework or Policy 18 of the South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan. In addition to this, the applicant has not been able to address the issues that have been raised in the objection from the Ministry of Defence, and therefore, for the reasons set out in pages 71 and 72, it is recommended that application P220881 should be refused.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments, please. Councillor Ralph Barker.
Thank you, Chair. Unless it's not an unacceptable question, are there any applications to this site?
Yeah, there are. There are a number of current proposals, current ones which are in the pipeline as well. These are that are going, they're being assessed in terms of the cumulative impact. But this application is very much treated on its own merits.
Thank you. Supplementary, Councillor Barker? No. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? If there are no further questions or comments, I'll recommend refusal.
Agree.
Agreed. Thank you. Anyone otherwise minded? No. Agenda item number 6 then is application P220973. It's a partial demolition of a stable block in Tarbrax and Lanark.
Thanks, Chair. This application relates to it's a vacant stable building within the confines of a small group of dwellings. The application initially proposed to demolish all the buildings, but following engagement with officers has been amended to retain the majority of the existing building and extend it to create a 4-bedroom dwelling. 16 letters of objection and 4 letters of support were submitted in relation to this application, all of which are on the Council portal and are summarised in section 7 of the report. However, when assessed against the relevant policies of the development plan, it is accepted that this proposal involves the conversion and extension of existing buildings and therefore complies with policies and 16 and 17 of National Planning Framework 4. The proposal relates to an existing cluster of residential properties in the rural area and therefore complies with Local Development Plan Policies 4, GBRA 4 and GBRA 5. The assessment of the report concludes that there are no other mitigating factors that would impact on the acceptability of this proposal and therefore subject to the conditions in section 11, and for the reasons set out in section 12, it is recommended that application P220973 should be approved.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments, please. If there are no questions or comments, I will recommend that we grant subject to conditions.
I'll second it.
All agreed? Thank you. Agenda item number 7, please, is application P230293. These are on pages 85 to 100 in your pack. And this is the erection of 224 dwellings at Lismahago.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to a site that is identified for housing in the adopted South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan, and as such, the principle of the development is acceptable. In relation to the details of the proposal, the applicant has provided a list of supporting information that is set out in section 5, and this has not led to any objections from consultees such as the Roads Authority, Scottish Water, SEPA or Transport Scotland. 50 letters of objection were submitted following a public consultation, and a summary of this is set out in section 7, and these are addressed in the assessment in section 10. Lismahago Community Council submitted a late representation offering comments on the potential impact of the proposal on the roads network and existing services, but once again it is considered that when assessed against the relevant development plan policies that this proposal is acceptable. Colleagues in housing, education and the road service have been consulted on any potential impacts on infrastructure, and in this context, the addendum to the report that is presented to members sets out the heads of terms of a Section 75 agreement that will need to be concluded if committee is minded to approve this application. This Section 75 agreement will be drafted in line with the Scottish Government Circular 3 of 2012, as well as South Lanarkshire's approved supporting planning guidance. But in summary, it requires contributions to primary, secondary and nursery provision, upgrades to community facilities and a payment towards affordable housing in the Clydesdale area. Detailed discussions on the Section 75 will follow after the decision taken by the Planning Committee, but in this context, members are asked to approve the application P230293, subject to the conclusion of the Section 75 agreement and the imposition of conditions on pages 94 to 98 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments, please. Councillor Alec Allison.
Query, Fraser, development in this area seems fairly sound, but elsewhere legislation's changing regarding safe walking routes to school. Has it been identified that there are safe walking routes to school from this development site? Or is there funding going to be required to upgrade any of the facilities for that to be the case?
Fraser. Just bring him in.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's been a transport assessment done for this development as part of the access arrangements. There's a new roundabout that goes in, Councillor, and as part of that, there's a 3-metre wide footway cycleway that extends for around 100 metres, and that then goes on to the existing footway network, which continues all the way to the 2 schools, Milton and Lismahago.
Thank you.
Councillor John Ross, please.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. My question relates to Section 75. Is it still the situation with Section 75 that we don't get any remuneration until all of the houses are complete? And if that is the case, can we change this in any way? Because it seems a ridiculous situation that we've got to wait to the completion of a site before we get the advantage of Section 75 monies. Thanks.
Fraser, I think you're probably best placed to answer that.
No, it's not necessarily on the completion. It's the details of the Section 75 are then discussed with the applicant. Issues around the contribution that would need to come in terms of affordable housing, that would come in advance of the development taking place. Issues around the school provision, that tends to be based on the capacity, but for something around 200 houses, then that's again a matter that we could look to get as sooner rather than later. So it's certainly not something that takes place at the end of the development, but it's something that gets written into the legal agreement, and that's the discussions that are subject to discussions with us, with officers and the applicant, and that goes into the finalised agreement, but certainly it wouldn't be at the end of the proposal.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments, please? If there are no further questions or comments, then I will move the recommendation that we grant subject to conditions and the conclusion of a Section 75 legal agreement.
I'll second it.
All agreed? Yes. Thank you. We'll go on to then agenda item number 8, please. Is application P231277, and that is the use of agricultural land for the sitting of 2 tourist accommodation pods, Dykehead Road in Carluke. Fraser.
Thanks, Chair. This application seeks permission for 2 tourist accommodation pods on a site that sits within the Greenbelt on agricultural land near Yield Shields. Consent has been granted for various developments in the past at this site, while some authorised structures also exist within the curtilage. But notwithstanding this, the current proposal for 2 pods is not accompanied by any specific justification as to why the cottages need to be located in the Greenbelt at this particular location. As such, it is considered that the proposal contravenes Policy 4 of the South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan, as it is not connected to an established recreational use or specific tourism-related facility. In addition to the proposals would introduce an inappropriate form of development and would not be consistent with Policy VET2 of the Local Development Plan, as it is not supported by a robust business case. Therefore, for the reasons set out in Section 11 of the report, which also picks up on national planning policy context, it is recommended that the application for 2 tourist pods at Smiddy Cottage should be refused.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments, please. Councillor David Shearer.
Thank you, Chair. Just to ask a general question, Fraser, I mean, obviously tourism is fairly important, especially in the Clydesdale area. It's just to nail it down that we're not against the likes of chalets or pods or anything like that for tourism. It's just in this location it does not have the supporting information that would make it viable. But in another location with the appropriate paperwork, it may well be acceptable.
I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Shearer, but I'll ask Fraser just to come in.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's the old cliche in terms of every application treated on its own merits, but certainly there are policies that we have within our local development plan that encourage tourist-related facilities, like chalets. It tends to be related to something that is actually a tourist business that's already there. There's a business case that's presented with it, but the kind of sporadic form of development that this represents doesn't fit with our policy.
Thank you. Councillor Ross Lambie, please.
Hi there. Thanks, Chair. Just a quick one. I mean, they're very, very small pods. I just wondered if they actually could fall within permitted development. Thanks.
My answer to that would be no, they don't fall within the permitted development. Fraser, do you need to come in on that now? No. Councillor Alec Allison.
Again, it's just an observation. Fraser, you were saying there that the tourist industry is an important one for the rural area, but in this case it doesn't really attach itself to any particular tourist attraction. In the rural area, a lot of your tourism is walking, etc. This isn't that far out from the end of the Pentland Hills, which takes them through into Edinburgh. It's not tourism is not necessarily associated with a specific site or venue. And whereas I don't disagree too much with what you're saying here just now, because there is more than that here. I would think in the future, when we're considering these, we need to have much broader view of what we are considering to be tourism and what is required.
Thank you, Councillor Allison. And I tend to agree, but I think there has to be that business case that comes forward with it. And on this occasion, that didn't come forward with us. No. There is no business case for these pods to be built there. And I think it's wrong that they are built there with no business case for that tourism. I will therefore recommend refusal.
Second.
All agreed? Thank you. We'll move then to agenda item number 9, please, is application P231501. And this is the proposed transport interchange to form the park and ride facility at East Kilbride. Fraser.
Thanks, Chair. This application relates to the formation of the park and ride and the associated infrastructure within the context of the new public transport interchange for Hare Myers. The applicant in this instance is South Lanarkshire Council, and to this end the proposals are set out in section 3, but detailed contractual arrangements which are out with the scope of this planning application will be addressed through separate committees of the Council. One letter of support and one letter of objection and 3 letters of support were submitted, and the issues raised have been addressed in the summary. Section 11 of the report in front of members today sets out a range of conditions that relate to traffic management, flood mitigation, as well as measures to protect active travel, biodiversity and the maintenance of vegetation in the surrounding area. Therefore, subject to the imposition of these conditions, it is recommended that planning application P231501 should be approved.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for questions or comments. Councillor David Watson, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to say at the outset I'm 100% behind this application. Much needed and already delayed, and it's good to see it come here. That said, I've got major concerns about the report that was presented to us, and I accept that there's other reports coming to committee soon. Whether I think the executive committee, there's to be a master plan report, but just focusing on this, and I'm not sure how familiar members might be with the actual location of this. I'm very familiar with it, having used the Hare Myers station in its existing position all my life. I've stayed in the area all my life, and I've represented the area since I was a councillor. So I'm familiar with the area and the issues that I'm about to raise. I'd like to, at this outset as well, I'd like to thank Colin Park. I've had a bit of a discussion with Colin on it, and he sent me an extensive email latest last night, and we've discussed it again this morning. And I think Colin's addressed most of my concerns through other development issues, but there's still a couple outstanding. And to put this in context, where the park and ride is going to be in the new station, as somebody described it to me quite recently, we've got potentially a new Whirlies at this side of the town if the traffic management and pedestrian movement isn't right. My main issues are about pedestrian access, although I had sought some reassurance from Colin about traffic movement on Redwood Drive and the Signal Junction and the roundabout on Eaglesham Road, Greenhills Road, Redwood Drive, and modifications that were to take place there that aren't addressed here but are getting addressed elsewhere, and Colin's given me assurances that, that they don't expect any issues and backup issues, because recently Network Rail were doing some work on Redwood Drive and there was traffic management in place and it was carnage, it was mayhem, and that has an impact on ambulance routes to the hospital as well as other things. I'm basically moving on. There's 2 conditions in the report about traffic crossings. One in the vicinity of Blaze Hill Road, crossing Eaglesham Road, and the other one in Redwood Drive with Eaglesham Road, which I'm happy with and we've spoken about. and there's a potential and a commitment that there'll be other crossings at that junction from Colin, particularly at Berrydale to Blaze Hill Road, because crossing Greenhills Road, because that is just horrendous and it's only get worse. But that commitment's there from Colin. The one that I am concerned about, and that there's no commitment, is to me a no-brainer, but roads will argue differently. Right at the vicinity of the station at the St James Centre, which is a busy shopping centre, and you have in there a Lidl, a Tony Macaroni's, a Oriental restaurant, a pub, vet, dentist, chemist, hairdryer, Greg's chip shop and others food outlets. It's a popular and busy centre. We're now going to put a train station there, and there's no pedestrianised crossing. There's some drop curbs, as Colin will tell you, but there's no controlled crossings. There is a controlled crossing at the existing Park and Ride station, which is further down Eaglesham Road, which to all intents and purposes will be redundant now, other than for 4 or 5 blocks of flats. There'll be no access to the station because the station's not going to be there. Putting a pedestrian crossing at the St James Centre would allow access for local residents. It would allow access for to and from Hare Myers Hospital, for folk using the centre, for food outlets, etc., and also for access to the railway station without having to go away to your left or away to your right where there's going to be crossings. And then the reality is people aren't going to walk that. Added to that, the footpath along the front of Hare Myers Hospital, and Colin's addressed this as well, but it's worth a mention because it needs monitored. The footpath that runs from the ambulance station all the way in front of Hare Myers Hospital is not safe. It is overgrown with vegetation, which is the responsibility of the hospital. And when I've raised this in the past, I've been told that it's deemed acceptable. Yesterday, when I drove along the road, there was 6 men walking in single file along that path because they couldn't walk 2 abreast. And you try walking along it with a buggy or anything else like that, it's a nightmare. I've had approach from somebody that, because it is a sighted athlete for a blind athlete, they stopped using the road because of the overgrown hedgerow and the ingrown moss and dirt on the path. Admittedly, Colin's given a commitment to clear that up and speak to the hospital. But at the moment, the hospital are only doing that once on an annual basis, and it's just no satisfactory, because at the end of the day, that's going to be the main footpath from people coming from the Westwood area, East Kilbride. If they're going to walk to the station, is going to be the main path. They'll walk up to where I'm proposing that we put a safe crossing and be able to cross that road safely. So, upshot, Chair, is Colin's addressed a number of the points I've raised with them, and I thank him for that. He hasn't addressed, to my satisfaction, the crossing at the retail centre and the main access into the station. And I have to say as well, there's also a residents' association there that in the last year have raised about that, getting a pedestrianised crossing at this area. So I would be moving an amendment to the report, Chair, that we add another condition under condition 11, where we've already agreed to put 2 crossings in, and I would be moving that we add in the crossing at the actual centre and train station. Thanks for your...
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Very lengthy and very in-depth. I'll bring in Councillor Alec Allison first of all, and then I've got Colin Park and Stuart Laird looking to come in as well. So I'll bring Councillor Allison in first, please.
I'll be opposite to the lengthy presentation. It sounded like a lot of common sense. We're trying to get people out of our cars and walking. So for the distance of putting one extra pedestrian crossing in, I think it would be beneficial to this application. So I'll second that amendment.
Thank you very much, Councillor Allison and Colin. I'll bring Colin Parkin, who's online, the Head of Roads and Transportation. Colin.
Thank you, Chair, and hopefully you can all hear me. So thanks for Councillor Watson's comments there, and just give Councillor Watson a commitment that we'll continue to work through the points that he's raised as Roads Authority. Just kind of picking up on a few of the points here today. So obviously Planning Committee today are here to determine the planning application. Obviously as Planning Authority, we're also the developer here, and I would give members and the wider committee comfort that connectivity, pedestrian connections has been key in our consideration. I think the two in reverse order, just picking up on the overgrown vegetation, that's clearly Councillor Watson, a Roads Authority matter there. That'll get acted upon, it'll be targeted, and we'll make sure that is safe, not for the station opening, but for anyone using the area in the coming weeks and months. In terms of the crossing in and around St James's Centre, I would agree. It's clear that when the station opens, there will be new desire lines identified, but there are also several existing problems there, I would say, that we are trying to tackle and have done over the years. Within the vicinity of the area you're talking about, Councillor Watson, there are kind of several crossing points on the islands at Strathday around about, uncontrolled crossing points, to be fair, between the bus stops. Again, these have got good visibility in the western arm, the eastern arm, and around Hare Myers and the development offices, and also in the Strathday arm roundabout. And in terms of our discussion yesterday, Councillor Watson, I'm going to look at kind of improving some of the kind of footway connections in that area again as Roads Authority. The problem I've got just now is that I don't think there is a direct link between the development and what you're asking for here. But my commitment as Roads Authority here again is that we know there's going to be probably a new desire line, but we're not entirely sure where. I think there is sufficient crossing points along that route at this moment in time for people to cross safely. Should they want something a little bit more time or a bit more control, there'll be the new crossings up to the west towards Redwood Drive, and obviously the existing crossing down at the current station location will remain in place for the time being. So I think there's sufficient just now, but the commitment I'd kind of given Councillor Watson prior to today was that we will be reviewing this immediately post-opening, and we'll take appropriate action, which, to be fair, may include the introduction of another pedestrian crossing. All members in committee today will control pedestrian crossing. All members of the committee today will probably have an area in their ward where they are asking for pedestrian crossing, but that needs to be governed and dictated by whether the assessment lends itself to that. So I am comfortable with what we have just now. I appreciate there's obviously been an amendment been put forward, and whatever planning committee agree on today, I will make sure happens. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Colin, and thank you for coming in at such late notice, so thank you very much for that. Councillor Watson, just before you come in, would it be the minds of this committee that has been proposed and seconded by Councillor Watson, Councillor Allison, that we take that condition and we add that in? I think there's a common sense approach for this new outstanding park and ride development at East Kilbride, and I as Chair would be happy to take that condition that we add in that crossing. But further to that is to we look at the other removal that Colin has says there. We may need to look at the other areas, and I think that should be part of that condition, is to look at that. But I think we go for what Councillor Watson has put in there, and that crossing is put at St James's.
I'll second it, Chair.
Councillor Watson.
Sorry, Chair, are you saying you would be accepting of this proposal? Aye. Right, thanks. It may be. I just make a comment to Colin that he says about the correlation with this, with the station. Of course, it's a correlation with the station in so much that there's a new park and ride and station going in there, and if we want people to walk there, we need to make sure there's a safe way for them to walk. And I try to cross that road when I'm watching my grandkid with a buggy, and at the present time, it's not very easy with the drop curbs where we are. And just basically, we keep going back to there is a crossing at the existing station. That is redundant come the new station. So yeah, thanks anyway for your comment, and take that on board.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Watson. If all members are agreed, then can we then recommend that we grant subject to condition, but adding in the condition 11? Stuart, have you got note of that, and are you happy with that? And I think this is when we actually have to listen to the local members, people who actually represent the area, and we take on board their concerns, and I think it's right and proper that we do that. And I do hope that this park and ride, I'm sure it will be successful, but it will be a safe walking route and people can use it as it is being put out to use. So therefore I'll recommend that, and it's been seconded by Jerry. All agreed? Agreed, thank you. We will then move on to agenda item number 10 then, please. And this is application P231543, and this is a demolition and rebuild of 2-storey dwelling houses and Bothwell, Sunningdale Wynd and Bothwell. Fraser?
Thanks, Chair. This application relates to, it's a residential area, originally constructed as self-build plots, accessed by a 2.5 metre wide public road in Bothwell. The applicants had initially submitted a proposal to extend the property. However, this was revised when it was recognised that demolition and rebuild was more cost effective, and neighbour notification was carried out again to allow for further comments. In this respect, 29 separate letters of objection have been received, and these are all on the Council's webpage and have been summarised in section 7 of the report presented to members, and relate to issues around the impact of construction, loss of light and privacy for neighbouring properties, and that the proposal was out of keeping with the surrounding area. The application was initially considered by the Planning Committee on March 12th, and the applicants were asked to provide information on traffic and site management plans. This information was submitted, and a report recommending approval was submitted to committee on May 28th. Members at that meeting requested that a site visit be arranged, which took place on August 22nd. In assessing the proposals against the relevant national and local plan policies, it is considered that the development is acceptable and that there are no overriding considerations that would lead to a recommendation for refusal. The applicants have amended the design of a proposal that was refused under delegated powers, and in doing so have addressed the concerns raised about the potential impact on the neighbouring properties and the surrounding area. In summary, it is considered that this proposal to replace a dwelling within an area that was established as a number of individual house plots and which is zoned for residential use and which is served by an adopted road is acceptable and should be approved subject to the conditions set out in section 11 of the report presented to members. Thank you.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for questions or comments. Councillor Maureen Devlin, please.
Thanks, Chair. And I know this is the third time it's been at committee, and I did request the site visit. I'm going to put an amendment forward to refuse it, and again it's on public safety. I believe it's an inappropriate area to demolish a house in such a confined space. There is a roads issue. A number of the members came down and viewed the position, so I'm not going to go any further, but I'm putting an amendment forward to refuse it on those grounds. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder, Councillor Devlin? Councillor Leslie MacDonald.
Yes, I will second Councillor Devlin.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? If there are no, Councillor Ralph Barker.
Thank you, Chair. Is it possible to advise the committee? The main objection is to the construction phase.
And demolition.
And
demolition.
Well, demolition and construction. It's that I never really know if planning is about what we end up with or the process, and I just wondered, is the process, part of the application? Thanks.
No, thanks, Chair. In terms of residential properties, there's a prior approval submission that needs to be submitted, but there isn't no scope for the council to refuse that permission. It needs a building warrant for demolition, but again, that tends to be a method process. So actually, demolition could continue without the engagement of the planning authority. It's a referral that we get that's taking place. the application that we're ostensibly considering here today is for the new development, for the replacement property, and that's where there's our own assessment in terms of the planning and roads considerations that the proposal is acceptable.
Councillor John Ross, please.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. I did attend the site visitation, and I did ask some questions of the officers who were present at the site visitation, mainly with regard to had any works been carried out to houses on the road of existing homeowners, and was told that there had been quite extensive work had been carried out to quite a few of these houses on previous occasions. And I asked at the time, did this cause this abnormal disruption? And I was told that no, it was acceptable at that time. I'd also asked what would happen if this went to the recorder, and what would happen, and was there any chance that they wouldn't grant this? And I was more or less told no, that this would, if we were recommending approval, even if this group rejected it, in all likelihood this would go ahead by someone from the Scottish Government coming out. I do have a certain empathy with the people that live in the street, but quite honestly, I think if somebody wants to knock down a house and build a new house on that plot, and we can put in the necessary restrictions, for instance, on the time that builders can be on the street, etc., that I'd be quite happy to let it go ahead on that basis. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Yeah, it does give concerns that if we do refuse it, it's how other people in that street will also be able to do alterations to their house, and I think that's what gives us all some sort of concerns. And I get the part of public safety, but there are other people who've done extensive work, and that could hinder anybody else looking for it. I think in the part of the reporter, that would be up for them to make that decision. It wouldn't be for our planning officials to make any recommendations. And what their outcome would be, supposing that it would go to the reporter. I'll bring in Councillor David Watson, please.
Thanks, Chair. I attended the site visit as well, and like others, I've got a lot of sympathy for the local residents due to the layout of that area, but that throws up probably more questions and answers about what's going to happen in the future in there and what happens. I think, similar to Councillor Ross's point about if this goes to the reporter, am I right in thinking we would lose control as an authority of conditions that we can put on this, that to restrict access times, to restrict working times, to maybe, when I was driving out, I was struggling to get out because of traffic at the nearby primary school. And again, we could maybe put mitigations in against that being a problem. I don't know if there's another way out of that main road, but certainly the way I came in and out, it was past, I think it's Bothwell Primary School. It was starting to get really busy, and you could only get down one side of the road, like probably every primary school in South Lanarkshire. But caught in two places with my thoughts on this one, but I say I'd just maybe like comment about who controls any conditions, should it go to the reporter and they grant it. Thanks, Chair.
Fraser?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think, as mentioned earlier, I wouldn't want to prejudge the outcome of a reporter's assessment of this planning application. I think putting this forward as on behalf of the planning service, I think that we felt that this proposal, it does comply with policy. There are a number of conditions that we've attached to the back of it, which is in terms of what the details in the traffic management statement, the construction management plan. That then is something that if it goes to the reporter, they're likely to replicate those conditions as well. They tend to ask the planning authority for conditions depending on whatever their recommendation is going to be, and I would assume they would probably replicate the ones that we have in here as well. But certainly the reporter would look at the matter afresh. But from my perspective around this, in terms of the planning service, I would see no reason to refuse this planning permission.
Thank you, Fraser. Councillor David McLachlan, please.
Thanks, Chair. The questions about whether or not the reporter would uphold or refuse or overturn has been questioned before, because there has been situations where recommendations have came to this committee. The members, for their own views, have decided not to accept those recommendations and refused it, have been appealed, and the appeal wasn't upheld. So it proves that the system works. There's a process where officials bring forward proposals based on their professional recommendations and judgment. Elected members sit here for a reason. Elected members sit here to represent their constituents and what they think is a fair balance. And I did visit the site as well, and I think the street, the narrowness of sections of the street would make it really, really difficult, and in fact impossible, to have large construction vehicles demolishing and rebuilding a new property bigger than the existing property that's there without causing adverse impact to those other people living in the street. So for that reason, I think I would support the amendment to refuse it, based on the professionals have done the right job, and we thank them for that. But we're here for a reason. That's the democratic process of the planning committee. And for that reason, I'm supporting amendment to refuse it. Thanks,
Thank
Chair.
you, Councillor McLachlan. If there's no further questions or comments, I will move the recommendation to grant subject to conditions.
I'll second it.
And we have an amendment from Councillor Devlin and seconded by Councillor MacDonald on public safety, that this be refused. Therefore, we will take it to the vote. Stuart, can you just clarify?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the motion as proposed by Councillor Nelson and seconded by Councillor Convery is that planning permission be granted, subject to the conditions detailed in the report. And the amendment as proposed by Councillor Devlin and seconded by Councillor MacDonald is that permission be refused on the grounds of public safety, as the site is too confined for the demolition of the house. Is that a fair reflection, Councillor Devlin? The vote is now open. If members can please indicate your voting preference. Thank you. Thank you. All members have now voted. I'm now stopping the vote. 13 members have voted in favour of the motion and 7 in favour of the amendment. I therefore declare the motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stuart. We will then move on to agenda item number 11, and Councillor Leslie MacDonald has registered an interest. Okay, agenda item number 11 is application P240112. These are on pages 121 to 136 in your pack, and it's the erection of a drive-through with associated works at land 70 metres south, Bullen Drive in Larkhall. I'll ask Fraser to present.
Thanks, Chair. This application relates to a proposed drive-through restaurant with associated parking and landscaping access to Bullen Drive, some 1.5 kilometres south of Larkhall town centre. The proposed restaurant is summarised in section 3 of the report, but is a typical McDonald's-style restaurant which, according to the applicants, is capable of seating up to 79 customers. Consultation with statutory bodies indicates that from a roads perspective, there is concern that roads in the area have not been adopted, and therefore they are out with the control of the council and the applicant. As such, while noting the potential adverse impacts of the proposal on other road users, it is commented that no regulatory measures can be implemented. 539 letters of support and 142 letters of objection have been submitted, and the summary of these is set out in section 7 of the report. addressing the consultation, representations and the assessment of the relevant planning considerations. Section 10 seeks to provide a balanced assessment of the proposal, but ultimately it is concluded that this proposal is not acceptable and that planning permission should be refused. In this respect, while noting that many of the letters of support referred to the employment-generating potential of this site, when this is weighed against the likely impact on traffic in the predominantly residential surrounding area, the potential for noise and late-night activity, the lack of control that could be provided in relation to traffic movement, and the fact that locating this use outside the established town centre would bring it into contravention with a number of local and national planning policies leads to the conclusion that planning application P24112 for this site at Borland Drive in Larkhall should be refused. Thank you.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for questions or comments. Councillor Ross Clark, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. There's multiple aspects to this centred around two main topics, but I can come back in to clarify anything if needed. First of all, on Borland Drive, and how it's mentioned the road isn't adopted, so we can't impose any regulations on it. How long would it take for the road to be brought up to an adoptable standard to then be adopted? Could a condition potentially be placed on that? They have to wait for that to occur, because it suggests here that it could be possible that it could be adopted at some point. It also mentions on 10.34 a transport assessment was prepared by the applicant that concludes the development would not result in adverse impacts upon the road network. Does that not conflict with what the Plan Department has said, or the Roads Department has said in their concerns when this assessment said it wouldn't have an adverse impact? And there's obviously the other aspect of the location of it not being located directly in the town centre boundary, so to speak. I believe we're being a bit harsh in the assessment of that and the interpretation of the policies that we're using. Obviously, there is a focus on the drive-through aspect of it. That's the one that will generate the most car usage. But of course, there's a restaurant attached to it as well. I think we're losing a bit of sight on that. It's mentioned about NPF4 and how it says that drive-through should only be approved if it's specifically allocated for an local development plan. But of course, as it mentions in the paper, the local development plan came first and doesn't account for that. But the Plan Department's made the assumption that the default position should be refused because it's not located in a town centre. But as has been shown since even at the last application, since that's been withdrawn, that there is no location within the town centre which would be suitable for a drive-through. So it seems like the position that we're being put in is that Larkhall can never get a drive-through. No drive-throughs are allowed in Larkhall because there isn't a location in the town centre which would be suitable for one. One of the locations that was suggested has been looked at and was deemed unsuitable. Other aspects, it's along the main road through Larkhall. It's not in the town centre boundary, but it's practically on the same physical road as the town centre. So there'll be lots of cars passing through that anyway. Next to the Canderside toll, which is directly joins onto the motorway. So I believe there'll be lots of passing cars on the road network anyway. It's along a bus route. People can cycle to it. It's accessible by pedestrian access, and I think it's been shown here there are lots of mitigations to promote active travel. It mentioned at 10.35 even a travel plan was submitted, objective reducing staff car journeys. It mentioned a travel plan coordinator would be appointed. The proposal appears to be compliant with most of the criteria listed in local and national sustainable transport-related policies. So it seems like all the necessary mitigations are being put in place. The NPF4, as said in the paper, doesn't mean it's a blanket ban on drive-throughs that are not located in town centres or in the allocated development plan. But it seems like that's the approach that we are we are taking here. Also, there's a strong case, the economic aspect of the jobs that will bring, and I think on balance that kind of outweighs some of the concerns that have been put in place. And as mentioned, Larkhall doesn't have a drive-through, so you've actually got lots of people who would be currently having to travel to, you know, Hamilton, Wishaw, whatever, to go to a drive-through. I don't know how many people would be suddenly taking up a McDonald's now that wouldn't be on the road network anyway because of this development. I believe this should be done on a case-by-case basis. I believe there's lots of mitigations in place to allay the concerns that have been mentioned. Also, more specifically, in the report, in 10.38 mentions the proposed drive-through restaurant is a significant travel generating use, 140 to 150 trips per hour at peak times. Hundreds, potentially thousands of customers visiting each day by private car. How have we came to that sort of assessment? Is that backed up in the transport assessment that was provided? And how many of those trips, done any sort of assessment on those trips, whether how much of a percentage of those is shared trips or people already on the road network? I don't believe it will actually add that many over to what's existing, and it's for those reasons that I've outlined that I would plan to put forward an amendment that this is granted. But I'm happy to wait for the answers to my questions and other speakers before that's done formally, but I don't believe the impacts that's detailed in this report is actually going to be as great as what has been outlined here.
Thank you. Councillor Clark. Generally speaking, as a member in the ward myself, there is areas within the town centre we don't always need to have a drive-through. The Scottish Government are trying to reduce car journeys, but yet we open a drive-through to increase car journeys. There is areas within our town centre that McDonald's can use. It would be a restaurant, and that's what we need within our town centres. We need a restaurant, we don't need a drive-through. So there is areas within our town centre, probably one of the best and busiest town centres in the whole of South Lanarkshire, but yet we will take people away from our town centre. But again, that's an argument that we would probably have between ourselves, and I don't want to get into that argument here. But certainly there is other areas. I'll bring in Fraser just to clarify a few points. If I ask, though, just for time, just to get straight to the point, I will be timing just to make sure we're within the standing orders, which is 3 minutes. So please make your point clear and concise, and we can get through this business. Thank you.
Yeah, I will be quite concise on this one. In terms of the planning considerations around this, and I'll bring Fraser in to talk about the sort of roads aspect of it. We have outlined a number of local development plan policies that this proposal actually contravenes as well. So that's Policy 10, Policy 2, Policy 15, SDC 4. These are South Lanarkshire's policies, and these are set out within the reasons for refusal as well. Policy 27 of the National Planning Framework, Policy 13, Policy 14, Policy 1, these are set in the National Planning Framework, and whether they are liked or not, they are the established national policy, and we are obliged to implement those as well. But even without National Planning Policy 4, it would contravene a number of South Lanarkshire's existing and approved local planning policies as well. As I mentioned in the assessment, we have provided a very balanced review. There are aspects of this proposal that we can see that there is merit in, but ultimately we have to make a recommendation on this matter, and the recommendation is that the impact that this would have in terms of our existing policies, the impact it could have on town centres, the impact of traffic that would be generated as a result of this use would be unacceptable within that, the residential area around there, and it doesn't really lead us to any sort of a conclusion that this proposal is acceptable. Fraser can comment on the adoption of the roads aspect on it, if that's helpful.
Thank you. Yeah. Borland Drive's currently under construction by a developer at the moment as a road construction consent, and that's likely to take, I would say, at least a couple of years before it gets to the adopted status.
Thank you, Fraser. Councillor Scott. Councillor Graham Scott, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be cognizant of what you said and I'll be as succinct as possible. This is a spectacular potential for an economic development in Larkhall. Can I just say the basic facts here? A McDonald's restaurant in Larkhall will generate 1.5 million for the local economy, 120 jobs. If I can read something from the paper last week, McDonald's plans to invest £1 billion in the UK and Ireland over the next 4 years. The fast food giant yesterday aims to open 200 new restaurants and hire 24,000 additional staff. So obviously, McDonald's see the potential for the economic growth, and the only way we can make our communities more prosperous is by jobs, by generating money in the economy and circulation in the economy. Another quick planning point is planning permission has already been granted for the site in November 2016 for a supermarket and a pub restaurant. Obviously, that's a far bigger footprint than the current McDonald's that's been planned here. And of course, 539 letters of support and only 142 objections. And of course, this is a sustainable reuse of a brownfield site. So obviously I've moved it at the bullet point speed there because I cognise what you've said. But I was prepared to move consent as well. But obviously as local member, Councillor Clark takes precedence. But yes, I'm delighted to support that this be a consent, not a refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. I think one of the questions I asked myself was how many of those support letters were AI generated. I think that's one of the questions that you probably should keep in the back of your mind because they were all duplicated in large numbers. Councillor Norman Ray, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got just a couple of questions. The first is around the issue of the drive-through and the generation of traffic and the environmental impact on that, which I think, from my reading up, was quite a considerable part of the reasoning behind the recommendation of refusal. It seems to me that a drive-through, by definition, is going to generate traffic potentially wherever you locate it. And therefore, if we take from that we refuse or propose to refuse partly on that basis, the logic would be that you would refuse a drive-through anywhere. And I seem to remember, if my memory is correct, that sometime last year we did approve one which might have been in East Kilbride next to a supermarket, which I think, again, my memory might be wrong, was recommended for approval. Now, there may have been different individual factors there, but certainly, obviously, we do sometimes approve drive-through restaurants. So I'm not sure to what extent we can say, well, it shouldn't be approved purely because it's a drive-through generating additional traffic, unless we take the view that we should refuse all drive-through restaurants. The other was just a clarification that while on one hand there is the comment from Rhodes that there may be parking issues on Boland Drive, on the other hand, in several places it says that there would be sufficient parking within the site, in the car park. So I wonder how do we sort of reconcile those 2 points? Thank you.
On it? Yeah, yes, there was an application that was approved last year for a McDonald's, but it was in a commercial centre. It was at the Morrisons at Lindsayfield, and that complied with policy. There was sufficient distance between that site and the residential area that was nearby it. There was conditions that were imposed on that as well, and there wasn't the impact that it had on there was we could control the traffic that was implemented that would be generated as a result of that use. The new National Planning Framework requires local authorities to identify sites for drive-throughs, and that may be something that we can consider through the next iteration of the Local Development Plan. This one is a speculative proposal that throws up a number of issues in terms of traffic. The traffic one is in terms of now we can't control the activity because the road has not been adopted. If the road had been adopted and we implement control, I would be inclined to think there could be an objection, there could be issues raised in terms of from the Roads Authority about the level of traffic that's generated as a result of that use. The Councillor had mentioned about the issue about the number of visits that it would be generated. That came from McDonald's himself, and that was causing us significant concern. An actual sit-down restaurant would generate a lot less traffic than a drive-through, and it's that circulatory type of activity that I think would cause us concern, and the fact that we couldn't control that activity as well. So it's not necessarily saying no to drive-throughs per se. I think it had been mentioned by the Chair, a McDonald's as a restaurant within the town centre would be acceptable. Other uses that could be identified for this site could come forward through the planning process, but there are strong concerns in terms of the impact of this proposal on this part of Larkhall that lead us to the recommendation for refusal.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McLachlan, please.
Thanks, Chair. Two-pronged part to this, if you don't mind, Chair. Borland Drive is not an adopted road, and Fraser's elaborated it may come round in a couple of years' time or whenever that may be. Something that's just jumping right off the page at me is there's a supermarket at the traffic lights, and I believe the traffic lights are put in place because the supermarket development took place, and that's Milburn Place. And I wonder why Milburn Place wasn't considered as the access point for a McDonald's restaurant.
The developer, Davey, that.
Sure. But, you know, at times I know that when people come forward with applications, they discuss it with planning officials, and you can have a discussion about what's likely to be acceptable or not, or what would be more favourable and what would suit the traffic and so on. But, you know, I'm just bemused as to why that isn't the access point, because there's a supermarket there, there's a traffic light junction that would control all that traffic. Fraser, have you got any?
Fraser?
Sorry, it wasn't a matter that came up in any discussions with the applicant. Whether or not that would make the use acceptable is, again, something that we need to be assessed through a fresh planning application, but it's certainly not something that was provided as an option. And that option would the block towards that, I'm assuming, is a matter that the applicant developers have to have dealt with, whether it's land ownership or there's another issue with that road. I'm not too sure.
The second part of my question, Chair, if you'll indulge me, is the fact that it's Borland Drive is not an adopted road. 150 yards from here, I think, in that direction, there's a McDonald's in the Douglas Park Retail Park, and it's got a drive-through, and the road there isn't adopted. And I know that because it's in my ward, and this is a negative, and maybe this is one of the reasons why an adopted road isn't that suitable, but the amount of, there's yellow lines on the road, but because it's not an adopted road, it doesn't have a TRO to back it up. So people park there indiscriminately, the Just Eat delivery food and so on. But that isn't an adopted road, as I'm led to believe. Maybe Fraser Jack can elaborate. But that's a long-established McDonald's there, and I just wonder what the difference is between that one and the one in Larkhall.
Fraser can come in terms of the situation with across the road. But one thing I would point out, though, is we're not actually using that as a reason for refusal. The reason for refusals are a number of other factors. So while that's a consideration and it's something we're putting into, it's not a matter that we've got any control over at all, but it's not actually one of the reasons for refusal on this application. But
Chair, are you going to come back? Oh, sorry. Right, Fraser. Sorry, beg your pardon, Chair.
Yeah, for the restrictions to go down, which would be needed to try and enforce any sort of overspill onto Borland Drive, you would need permission from the owner of the road. And in the case in Hamilton, they're obviously keen to have the restrictions down there, so there was no issue with that. And it may be a different situation at Borland Drive.
I'll give you a supplementary, Councillor McLachlan. Hang on just a second.
Chair, I wonder if it's appropriate, given the fact that, you know, I've listened to Councillor Clark and I'm pretty sure most people in Larkhall would welcome a McDonald's in the area. I wonder if it's appropriate to suggest that this be continued and ask the developer if they would consider an alternative access in Milburn Place. And if there isn't, to come back and tell us that, because I think it's quite a loss for the town to miss out on a McDonald's. There's all sorts of reasons why other people might suggest you should shut all McDonald's down, but hey, we are where we are and people do desire that. I'm a wee bit surprised at yourself, Chair, given the local member for Larkhall, but is it possible to ask for a continuation for further discussions with the developer to consider Milburn Place? Would that be appropriate?
I mean, I think that's for you to decide.
Well, I'll move that then.
If you want to move that,
I'll
we
move that
defer
then,
it, then we'd need to take that to a vote, which is absolutely fine. We just need to get a seconder for it. Fraser, you want to?
Sorry, Chair, just to be saying, that access wasn't part of the planning application. It was actually presented. It would then mean that we would be on a different application site. It would require a new application. We would need to go through the new neighbour notification around it. So it would really be up to the applicant themselves to resubmit. So it's not as if it couldn't be an amendment to the application as presented to the committee today. That would be a revised proposal. That's open to the applicants to do. So they may, as a result of any decision that sits on the back of it, they may want to come in with another application. That could take a number of months for them to progress. So I wouldn't necessarily, but I would suggest that it's not something that we could add as an amendment to the application that's presented today.
Last one, Councillor McLaughlin, then we will move on.
I'm not asking for further questions here. It's a dialogue. You know, you told me it's up to me, but and this is why I asked for clarification. What Fraser said puts a different light on it. But if you, as chair, if you think that it's up to me, then I'll move that we continue this for further discussions with. And I hear what you're saying, Fraser, but I think because if an application is refused, I believe there's a period of time before you can come back. Am I correct? No. So, well, since I've done it, I've made the motion, Chair. I move that we continue this for further discussions with the developer to see if they would consider Milburn Place as an alternative.
Okay. We need to see if you had a seconder for that. Your seconder? I'll second. We're just going to check to see if that would be competent enough. While we're doing that, I'll bring in Councillor Shearer.
Thank you, Chair. Just to agree with Councillor McLaughlin, I do think there are issues here that could be resolved, hopefully with discussion, and it seems to be resolving round about the roads issue. I also remember an application that came from East Kilbride which had many roads issues, not the one at Morrison's, but another one elsewhere in East Kilbride, and those were eventually resolved through negotiation. I would hope that this could be done on this location, because it is going to be, as Councillor Scott has said, a fairly massive injection of investment into the Larkhall area, a great number of jobs. I know there's discussion of is it 120 or is it not going to be 120. Honestly, it doesn't matter to me. I mean, the jobs are jobs, and many times these are jobs for young people. It's their first job, it's their way into a working life, and we cannot reject that out of hand. And basically, and I would say in conclusion, Chair, if this gets rejected, I'll have it in Carluke in a minute, because I could take a Morrison's in a minute in Carluke if we can find a location. I would definitely not be rejecting it. Thank you, Chair.
I would hope if one comes forward, you'll declare an interest now, Councillor Shearer. We'll move on to Councillor Allison, please.
Thanks, Chair. Some of the issues have really been covered there. What's quite clear here is there's a wide difference of opinion within the community about support or not of this. But what there is a significant number of people who would like this type of service. So what I'm wondering is, with the planning concerns about this particular site, has any work been done through economic development for identifying sites that would have been suitable? And I know quite clearly you can only judge an application that's in front of you, but have we passed this on to economic development at all to see if they can support and find a venue for a facility that does seem to be wished for in Larkhall?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. No, I suppose it's important to point out this isn't it's not a refusal about a McDonald's. It's the appropriateness of this site for a development of the nature as presented to us, and in planning terms, the recommendation that it should be refused. McDonald's, if they'll have extensive site search exercises going on. They'll be looking at a number of locations, possibly even so it's they will be looking at a number of places, and when they come to us and there's an appropriate site, we will work very positively with them. I think the difficulty we've got is this is the only site that they've came and spoke to us about. This is the only site that they've presented to us. Any other proposals that they wanted or changes around it is that they've not come forward with any. So we have to consider the application that's presented to us. But if McDonald's could identify a site, we will engage with them constructively. But personally, I can't see how they can actually deliver this site without having significant adverse impacts on the surrounding area and running contrary to policy.
Thank you. We have three further, Councillor Elise Frame, Councillor Ross and then Councillor Clark, and then we will bring this to a close. Councillor Frame.
Hi, thanks very much, Chair. I just want to come in and say that I think it would be a shame if this wasn't to go ahead. I think to bring this into Larkhall would be absolutely fantastic. I've got two teenage kids, one who started off his career in McDonald's, but unfortunately because there was not one locally, we had to go all the way to Wishaw for him to start his career. Now, it was a stepping stone to get the career he's in just now, but it gave him some life experience and some work, and that's what generally the young people do in McDonald's. And where it is, it's open to be. I think there is resolutions that we can come around. I remember a few not long ago in East Kilbride, we had to put some on that they couldn't get deliveries after 10 o'clock at night and different things. So maybe that's something we can look into, to look with them to see if there's something we could help out with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor John Ross, please.
Yes, thanks, Chair. My comment was mainly on the situation with car travel. At present time, if the poor people of Larkhall don't have any car through restaurants, where do they go? Hamilton? Hamilton, they must come to Hamilton, and surely that involves car journeys all the time, which would probably cause more of a disruption to the roads than those people locally living in Larkhall using a drive-through. So from my point of view, I don't see why we should be dropping it on that situation. The other thing I would like clarity on, there's been an amendment moved and seconded that will take this for further consideration. Is that competent? Because I think we were already told that to discuss that would require a new planning application. How long would that take? And what would be the implications of that? So I need to find out before I decide which way I'm going to vote, whether that would be competent or not. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Firstly, just in the car journeys and eating out in Larkhall itself, there is plenty of eating out places in Larkhall. There is restaurants, there is many takeaways in Larkhall that we are overrun with them. But that's not a planning material consent, so we'll move on from that part. In regards to, as in the motion, the amendment competent, we are just checking that with legal as we speak, so I think we'll have a Councillor Ross Clark, and then we're going to adjourn for 5 minutes to seek some clarification on that. So I'll take Councillor Clark, then we'll adjourn for 5 minutes, and we'll come back and we'll make our decision. Councillor Clark.
Thank you for taking me again, Chair. I'll try and be quick. I do think it's a sensible suggestion from Councillor McLachlan took that alternative access route. However, this application has already been withdrawn after it was recommended for refusal last time. So my fear would be that it would go away completely if it was delayed again. And I do think there are mitigations and answers in that report for impact on the road network anyway. Just one question to pick up again that I don't think was fully answered on the 140 to 150 trips at peak hour time, I think it was, or thousands each day. How much of that do we know is shared trips or cars already on the road network? Because as has been said, there's already a supermarket there. There's an industrial estate that I believe has some hot food takeaways there. So it's not like it's an isolated development. What discussions have taken place since the last application was withdrawn? And I do know your comments, Chair, about the letters of support, and much of the letters of support do have the same wording, but that doesn't mean there isn't that amount of people in support of the application. They may have just done something similar to signing a petition. And I would still like to move that this is granted, subject to conditions deemed appropriate by the Planning Department. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I agree. I go back to that part and the point of the AI-generated supports. How many people were from Larkhall? How many actually stay in Larkhall? Nobody can tell you that. They might be from Timbuktu. Nobody knows where they came from. So that's why I'm still concerned about the high number, but we don't even know where they are, and most of them are AI generated. Is there anything in there, Fraser, you want to answer? Okay, therefore we will take a recess until 11:55. We will reconvene at 11:55. We will discuss and we will make the decision. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Welcome back, everyone. First of all, I'll just get Fraser to clarify Councillor McLaughlin's amendment. Fraser, can you just clarify the process of that amendment, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. No, regarding the suggestion of taking an alternative means of access, no, that is something that we could go back and ask the applicant about. The difficulty we would get with that is that it would then lead to a different planning application. So while the applicant, no, they've got two options around this, is they can then say, yeah, we would agree to that, or they can say they disagree to it and they want the application to be considered as presented. If they agree to it, they would have to resubmit. They'd have to submit a revised planning application. It would then be subject to the same level of consultation, engagement in the process that it would take that through as well. I would also add, and it's come back to, we haven't actually refused it on a roads ground. There are a number of other factors that the application's been refused against. So it wouldn't necessarily, by addressing that concern about an access coming off the Lidl car park, there would still be a number of other considerations that, that the applicant would have to bear in mind in making a new submission. And certainly we would have to go through with a fresh application and all the consultation that goes with that as well. So while it can be deferred, the onus would very much sit on the applicant in terms of what they would decide to do. And they may want to just proceed with the application as presented.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Thanks, Chair. And Fraser, thanks for clarification. I'm not going to ask you to go through it all again, but is the drive-through the main sort of problem, basically, without going through all the detail of the report? Is that the main issue, really, the drive-through?
It probably is one of the main factors around it. That's the thing that brings it more into competition with policy around it. The traffic that would generate, and the fact that we can't control the issues around it. Yeah, I would be inclined to think it's a drive-through, but it is not the only issue. So there are a number of other considerations we need to take on board. And remember, if we do public consultation again on this, members of the public may raise a whole raft of new issues which we would have to take on board and consider.
Chair, I wonder if I can be a wee bit controversial, and bear in mind Jerry Condry's reminded me we've got a meeting at 12:30. Would it be possible to agree in part that there's a restaurant there without a drive-through? Just throwing the spanner right into the works there? No. Okay.
No. Are you still happy with your amendment then?
No, I'll withdraw that then.
Withdraw it. Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
Chair.
you. That's been withdrawn then. Councillor Clark, if I can come to you. Well, Councillor Shearer, are you happy with that? That's been withdrawn? I didn't think so, but anyway, well, I was asked to ask. Councillor Clark, can I just clarify your amendment and your reasons behind your amendment, please? And we'll look for a seconder.
Yeah, my amendment is to grant subject to conditions deemed appropriate by the Plan Department, because I believe that the benefits, such as the economic benefits, outweigh the negative impacts detailed in the report, which I believe aren't as great as what is suggested. If that makes sense for an amendment.
I think we just need to double check that. So you're contrary to local policy?
Yes.
Contrary to local policy. Okay, thank you. I'll look for a seconder. I've got Councillor Frame. No, yeah, she was there, but I'm looking for a seconder for Councillor Clark.
David Shearer.
David Shearer. Councillor Shearer. Councillor Shearer.
In the light of the withdrawal of the earlier motion, I will second Councillor Clark's motion.
Thank you. I'll then bring this to a vote. Just before I do so, I will, after careful consideration, I'm going to move the recommendation to refuse against application for McDonald's at Bolland Drive for the reasons set out in the report prepared by the officers. As this is within my own ward, and my priority as a local elected member is protecting the existing businesses in our town centre, which plays a vital part in boosting our local economy. I am of the opinion that if we approve a development for a major fast food chain to operate outside the town centre, that it will draw customers away from our established businesses and undermine the efforts that this council and other administrations and our local community have made sure to make sure that Larkhall has a thriving town centre, and I may add that one of the most well-used town centres in South Lanarkshire. I am also concerned about the adverse impact that this proposal would have on local residents, from traffic congestion and the unacceptable level of disruption that this would bring to a predominantly residential area. I will vote against this application as I think this is the best outcome for the Larkhall community, and it will protect existing jobs in the town centre and the communities that my constituents live in. I therefore move accordingly for the recommendation set out in this paper to refuse the application.
I'll second the report.
I'll take it to a vote.
Okay, thank you, Chair. First of all, if I can just deal with a procedural issue. We have 21 members in total attending today. Obviously, Councillor MacDonald has declared an interest, and also Councillor Mary Donnelly had to leave the meeting due to IT difficulties. So, Councillor Donnelly, you are not entitled to vote on this item. So, moving to the motion and amendment. The motion, as proposed by Councillor Nelson and seconded by Councillor Convery, is to refuse the planning application for the reasons detailed in the report. Amendment, as moved or proposed by Councillor Clark and seconded by Councillor Shearer, is to grant planning applications subject to appropriate conditions being prepared by officers on the grounds that, although it is contrary to the development plan, the economic benefits outweigh the policy concerns outlined in the officer's report. The vote is now open. If members can please indicate your voting preference. Thank you. We have one member still to indicate their voting preference. Thank you. All members have now voted, and I'm now closing the vote. Seems to be a technical issue. I'm sorry, members, but that seems to have cleared on the screen. So I'm going to restart the vote. It's not letting me. Yeah, it's reappeared on screen. So 13 members have voted in favour of the amendment and 5 members have voted in favour of the motion. I therefore declare the amendment carried. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask if somebody can bring in Councillor MacDonald. Davy, can you maybe? Please, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 12. This application P240192. These are pages 137 to 144, and that's a demolition of existing outbuilding in the erection of 2 detached dwellings at Ros Farm in Straven. Fraser.
Thanks, Chair. This application seeks consent for the erection of 2 dwellings, which it is proposed would replace 2 steel sheds that exist on this site. Planning consents have been granted for various developments on this site dating back some years, but it is noted that the most recent has lapsed and predated the current local and national development plan policy context. The applicants have amended the design of a proposal that was refused under oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong page. Sorry about that one. In this respect, as set out in section 10 of the report, the proposals submitted do not comply with Policy 4 and Policy GBRA 5 of the South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan in that it does not seek to reuse a redundant or unused building. It is also noted that consents do still exist that would allow a degree of residential development at this location, and in this context the Planning Authority would not be involved in this development if it was to be pursued. Therefore, for the reasons set out in section 11 of the report, it is recommended that planning application P240192 should be refused.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments, please. Councillor Shearer.
Yep, just seeking clarity.
I'll just ask you just to lift your microphone up a wee bit. That's better.
Are you happy with that, Chair? Good.
Hearing aids not working.
Just for clarification, Fraser, are you saying that there's a live application that could be used, and this is why we're basically refusing that this new one doesn't quite fit, but there's an older one that could be used? Is that correct?
It's not necessarily the prime reason, but it's a fact. Yeah, there is a consent that already exists on that site as well, which could be implemented.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments, please? If there are no further questions or comments, the recommendation is to refuse. I will recommend the refusal.
I'll second it.
All agreed? Thank you. Agenda item number 13 then is application P240330. These are pages 145 to 154. It's retrospective erection of 4 dwelling houses, Milton Road, Carluke. Fraser.
Thanks, Chair. This application relates to a site within the Greenbelt, southwest of the West Coast Main Line, outside the settlement boundary of Carluke. Planning permission is sought in retrospect for 4 cabin-style dwelling houses, which are accessed from the private road that leads from Milton Road and which serves 3 existing traditional cottages and a modern development that replaced former stables. This application was submitted following the instigation of enforcement proceedings to address the potential breaches of planning controls that may have taken place, and this is subject to different processes that are available to the Planning Authority. With regard to the proposal that is currently before members, it is noted that the determining issues in relation to this proposal are in terms of its compliance or lack of with National Planning Framework 4 and the Local Development Plan. In this respect, it is considered that the proposals do not comply with a number of national and local policies, and these are set out in section 10 of the report presented to members. From a local perspective, it is stressed that the application would be contrary to Policy 4 of the adopted South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan, as it relates to a development which does not need to be relocated in the Greenbelt, and as a result is also contrary to Policies GBRA 5, 8 and 9 of the South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan. It is also noted that this application has been subject to an objection from the Roads Authority, as the access road has not been constructed to an adoptable standard. Therefore, for the reasons set out in section 11 of today's papers, the recommendation to members is that this application should be refused.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments, please. If there are no questions or comments, I will recommend that we refuse.
I'll second it.
All agreed. Thank you. We'll then move on to agenda item number 14 then, is application P240449. These are on pages 155 to 164. It's the erection of 19 houses, including 8 cottage flats at the former McWhirter Home House in Raplar Street, Larkhall. Fraser.
Thanks, Chair. This application from South Lanarkshire Council seeks consent for the erection of 19 houses for social rent on a site that was previously accommodated in McWhirter House Care Home. One letter of objection was submitted, which primarily related to issues arising from construction, but in assessing the proposals, it is considered that the details are acceptable and that there are no planning reasons that would mitigate against this development. This being the case, it is considered that this proposal is acceptable, and whilst not a determining land use planning consideration, the development will make a positive contribution to the supply of council housing in Larkhall, and therefore is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments. Councillor Ross Clark, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, I do think it's a good thing this land is being put to use. Just one question so it's clear to anyone watching, anyone who's interested. Will this mix of housing include amenity, wheelchair accessible or adaptable housing? Just so it's clear for, yeah.
Yes, it does. In terms of the submission, but obviously that would be a matter for my colleagues in housing to progress that, but it is included within the scheme.
Councillor MacDonald, please.
Thanks, Chair. Can I just welcome this report? This, as you're all aware, the Larkhall councillors anyway, that McWhirters has been closed for some considerable time, has been demolished, and this planning application has finally arrived with us. Can I also say that the Nisbet Centre, which is next door, is due for demolition soon too, and that will also be progressive housing. So yes, this is a brilliant, absolutely wonderful story for Larkhall. So thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? I just make a few comments myself. I'm pleased to move, subject to conditions, that we grant full planning permission for this development. I think it is truly heartening to see more social housing being proposed for Larkhall, housing that is much needed across all of our communities. This site, jointly developed by Housing and Technical Resources in collaboration with the Health and Social Care Partnership, has been thoughtfully designed to meet the specific needs identified by the HSCP. This includes the incorporation of wheelchair accessible and amenity standard housing within the proposed development. Importantly, all properties in this development can be easily adapted to suit the changing needs of individuals and families over time. Having engaged in discussions with officers in housing, I remain steadfast in my belief that we must ensure those in genuine need, those who are appropriately placed on the housing list, are given the opportunity to create a thriving, community-spirited neighbourhood on the site of the former care home. However, it would be remiss of me not to address a broader issue. Over the years, Larkhall has seen the loss of many vital facilities. And with the recent closure of Larkhall Community Centre, this trend is concerning. If we are to sustain a vibrant town like Larkhall, we cannot allow this pattern to continue. The ongoing planning for the new leisure centre, which has involved minimal community consultation, leaves me worried that we are being steered towards something that may not fully serve our community's needs. I strongly urge the Council to ensure that as we continue to build new homes in Larkhall, our facilities such as lifestyle centres and the new leisure centre expand and improve alongside them. With these points in mind, members, I move that we approve this development and happy to do so.
And I'll second the report.
All agreed? Agreed. Thank you. We'll then move to agenda item 15. There are no items of urgent business. I thank you for your attendance today. Have a safe day. Thank you.
No more speeches.
No more speeches.